welcome back to my channel. Before I start this video, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that subscribed to me and is supporting my channel so far. Recently I hit 100 subscribers, which is super exciting, and I'm so grateful for every one of you. I consider my channel to be a little bit of a family, a bit of my own community, and everyone that is subscribed, everyone that supports me is a part of that community and that family. If you are watching one of my videos for the first time, or you have just not yet subscribed to my channel, then I'd really appreciate if you would consider doing that to become a part of this community. As I said, if you're not subscribed already, or if you're seeing me for the first time, my name is Chloe. I post bookish content every week here on my YouTube channel. I also try and post pictures over on Instagram, but I'm not very good at it. But I will leave my Instagram down below I will leave my Instagram down below along with my Goodreads account. Today's video is going to be my March wrap up. It's being filmed just a little bit late. It's actually currently the 11th of April. The reason that I'm filming this so late is because I went to visit my family for a couple of weeks, so I didn't get to film then, and I've been doing exams for the last week, so I just haven't had a chance to film. I've also been recovering from an ear infection, so that sort of put me out of the game for a little bit, but I'm feeling better and I'm ready to film, and I'm just super excited to talk to you guys about the books that I read in March. Not gonna lie, I read a lot of books. Please don't compare yourself to me. I know there's people that read a lot more books than me, there's people that read not as many books as me. A big part of why I read so many books this month is because I've been taking part in a couple of readathons, which I'm not doing as much now. The month of March was just a really good reading month for me, so as I said, please do not compare yourself to me, because I don't know, comparing yourself to other people just doesn't bring anyone any joy. Let's just start off with some of the statistics that I have for this month. We're a quarter of the way into the year, so I will be doing a quarterly wrap up / statistics video, because there's a lot more statistics that I could talk about. There's a lot more things I could go into depth about, but I don't want to do them in my monthly wrap ups because they tend to take a long time anyway. So that will be coming at some point. Make sure to keep your eyes peeled. But I'm just going to start with the statistics that I like to cover for my monthly wrap-ups. Let's start off with the basics: how many books I read, how many pages I read, and then obviously that's all in comparison to last month. In February I managed to read 14 books. I only spoke about 13 of them in my wrap-up because I read one straight after I filmed that wrap-up. In March I managed to read 25 books, which, as I said, is astronomical for me. I'm really proud of myself. I also know that I didn't have that much going on, so therefore I was able to do a lot more reading. I also set off some days. I did the Bookopoly-thon, which was a 48-hour readathon, and I really dedicated the 2 days to that. So I managed to read 8 books within that time period, so that also helped a lot, adding to the amount of books that I read. In February I managed to read 4,364 pages, and in March I managed to read 8,384 pages, which obviously is a lot more than I read in February, once again because I read a lot of books. As far as ratings go, in March I had 6 5-star books, 10 4-star books and 7 3-star books, and no 2 or 1-star books. I have touched upon this before. I think I tend to be nicer with my ratings. I also am very picky when it comes to buying books and figuring out what I want to read, because I don't want to spend time on books that I am not quite sure about, with a few exceptions, which I will actually be talking about in this video, because there was one book that I read and going into it I knew that I could potentially really not like it. In general, it's a really good reading month as far as star ratings go. In February I did not talk about my average rating, but I've decided to add that into this wrap up. So in February my average rating was 3.3 stars, and in March my average rating was 3.96 stars, so very, very close to 4 stars. So it just proves that like I had a lot of good books. I also generally tend to give a lot of 4 stars throughout my reading, so that is why this is gonna take a little bit of time. These are the genres that I read in throughout March, bearing in mind that when it comes to putting books in categories, when it comes to genre, it can be slightly subjective because it's more like what you think it's leaning towards, because some of these books like fit multiple different genres and I've just put them into a genre that I think describes them best. So I read 1 non-fiction book, 3 sci-fi books and 4 thrillers. I read 1 classic. I read 4 literary fiction and 3 graphic novels. I read 2 horrors and 1 short story, 1 dystopia, 1 fantasy, 2 poetry books. One of them was a longer poetry narrative kind of story. The other one was a poetry collection. And finally, I read 2 contemporaries. So it was a mixed bag. Honestly, I would have liked to read more horror, but I'm hoping that I'm going to get more into horror as the year goes on. I would also like to pick up more dystopia in the future, but I'm pretty happy that this was a mixed bag. It leans more towards thrillers, literary fiction, but I do think it's in general a very mixed bag. They were all the statistics. Let's talk about the books. I'm not gonna go into depth about all of these books. I'm gonna name every single book that I read. However, I will only be talking about books that I feel like I want to say something about, because honestly I can't remember all of them. Also, it would take me forever if I had to get through all 25 of these books. But the first book that I read this month, which was also one that I do definitely want to talk about, and it's one that really resonated with me and really hit me where it is important. I don't know what I'm saying. And that was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I've read her short story collection, Her Body and Other Parties, and I really, really enjoyed that. So of course I wanted to pick up her memoir. It is a really, I think, important memoir to read. Anyone, it doesn't matter what your gender identity is, what your sexuality is, what race you are, what socioeconomic background you come from. I think it's a book that everyone should read and would benefit from, because it talks about a lot of stuff. It talks about abuse. It essentially chronicles Carmen Maria Machado's experience being in a same-sex abusive relationship where she was the one being abused. It's very experimental, so I guess in that sense it's not for everyone, but I really enjoyed the way it was written. I enjoyed the styles of the chapters and the switching between different genres and using different tropes and actually mentioning different tropes, and sort of there were literary references. There was actually like stars and then like a footnote explaining some of like these particularly like tropes within fairy tales, and that was really interesting. This was, as I said, the first book that I read in the month. I do not remember so many specific details. I just remember thinking that it was very, very well written. I absolutely love Carmen Maria Machado's writing. I think she is a genius. I honestly do, and I think there's a reason that she's doing so well, and I can't wait to read some more of her stuff in the future. The next couple of books I'm not going to talk too much about. I read Scarlet, which is the second book in the Lunar Chronicle series by Marissa Meyer. And then I read Bird Box by Josh Malerman, which is obviously the thriller that the Netflix adaptation is based off of. And I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is obviously a classic. It's very well known, and I did really enjoy that. Not going to say much about it. I will just say that I gave Scarlet 4 stars, I gave Bird Box 3 stars, and I gave Rebecca 4 stars. Next on to a couple of books I definitely do want to talk about. The first one is Trust Exercise by Susan Choi. The reason I picked this book up is because I honestly had not heard any rave reviews about it. The only 2 people that I've heard talk about this in depth, or at least in some capacity, were Emma from Drinking by My Shelf and Noelle Gallagher, and they both gave this a kind of middle of the road / not great review. So I was really interested in the premise and the way they described it. It's one of those books where the way you describe it, or like just anyone honestly could describe it and it would sound interesting. It's got such an interesting premise. There's a lot of things that the author tries to do which are so intriguing, and if they were executed properly they would be absolutely mind-blowing and so well done. It would be such a great book, but unfortunately it just didn't quite hit the mark. I think that there's just something, I don't know if it's the author's writing style, if it's their execution, it's somewhere along those lines that this just didn't go great. I gave this 3 stars, but I did actually enjoy it. I was just left thinking, what? But not in a good way, because I have read books where I feel really confused and I don't understand what's going on, but I'm completely fine with that, whereas this one is supposed to be a bit more grounded, a bit more realistic, and I still didn't understand what was going on. And I think that when it's more like literary fiction in this, like with this kind of style of a book, you sort of want to have an understanding of what's going on, and I don't think that it was meant to be a book that confuses people. I just don't think it was quite executed properly. Trust Exercise follows Sarah and David, who go to a performing arts school. They've got a drama instructor called Mr. Kingsley, who is very, like, he's a big character essentially. He's like very well known in the school for being a bit of an oddbod. He is just a very, what should have been a very interesting character. I don't think there was too much about Mr. Kingsley in here, which is a shame. I think that it would have been more interesting going into depth in sort of his characterization. And the way that this is described is it says that Mr. Kingsley initiates them into a dangerous game, which makes it sound like there's going to be something very high stakes in here, but it's not. There's not really a game element aside from like the trust exercises that they do in their classes. But the trust exercises are really not that big a part of it. They are if you think about it more. And that is obviously an important part of like some books, is the sort of idea of being able to think about them more in depth and then realising that there is connections between different things that you didn't realise while you were reading it. However, I don't think that it was quite covered enough to be able to feel like it warrants the name Trust Exercise, or that it warrants the description of being a dangerous game, because I do not think it was like that at all. There are some topics that are covered in this. There's definitely some trigger warnings. I'm not going to say them here because it really does spoil the plot of the book, but if you're someone that doesn't like trigger warnings used kind of as a plot device or as a like a page turner or as like a surprise, then don't read this book. Because it really does. There's some things in here that like are just not very nice topics, but they're just not covered in a great way. They feel like they've always almost been like brushed to the side. They don't feel like they've been handled with the care that I know a lot of other writers and a lot of other books do with these kind of topics. So just bear that in mind if you do decide to read this. The next book I read was Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. This is a graphic novel. It's super cute. It's essentially just about 2 friends who work at a pumpkin patch during the autumn Halloween sort of time, and it's their last year working in the pumpkin patch before they go off to college, and it was just really cute. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I liked the art style a lot. I enjoyed the narrative, the story, the plot. I enjoyed the characters. There's not much else to say, but I really did enjoy it and I thought it was super cute. The next book I read, which was a part of one of my vlogs, I mean, quite a few of these books were part of my vlogs, either for Tis the Damp readathon or for the Bookoplathon. I will leave the links down below or something like that. So the next book that I read was The Project by Courtney Summers. I was super intrigued about this. I was super excited to pick it up. I actually got this like pretty much straight after it was published, which I usually don't do, but I was just so intrigued. And I also read this as a buddy read, so that sort of gave me a motivation to pick it up. The Project is written by the same author as Sadie, which is a book that I haven't read but I'm really interested in picking up, and I've heard a lot of things, very good things about it, so that was another reason that I wanted to pick the project up. I thought that Courtney Summers would be a very good author. This book essentially follows a girl who becomes a part of a cult, and it actually mainly follows her sister, who is trying to figure out what's happened and trying to figure out like what's going on with this cult and how to find her sister, and then like what her sister's doing, etc. It doesn't actually focus too much on the sister, aside from like talking about her sort of in third perspective, trying to figure out through the eyes of the main character, her sister, what's happened to her. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the cult aspect. I personally think cults are super intriguing, such an interesting psychological topic. I think because this was YA, it just really did not delve into the psychology as much as I would have liked it to be. I think in the future, if I want to read a book about a cult, like a fiction book about a cult, I will probably look more for adult fiction, because I feel like psychology tends to be a heavier topic, especially when it comes to things like cults. So it'll be really interesting to pick up some more sort of cult books. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I'll definitely be picking some more stuff up by this author. Then I read a short story called This Is Pleasure, a story by Mary Gateskill. The reason I'm looking down is because honestly, like, I don't remember much about this. I sort of read it on a whim. I heard about it in one of Carly's videos where she was reading, I want to say it was Anna Taylor-Joy's favourite books / stories. This short story, like, honestly, I don't really want to touch upon it that much. I can't remember much of it, but I sort of just read it on a whim. That's why it's there. The next book that I do want to talk about that I read is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is a long time coming. I have only had this for a few months. However, I've known about this for ages and ages, and I have wanted to read it. I have read Donna Tartt's, well, one of her other books, which is The Goldfinch. I didn't enjoy that much. I thought it was just a bit too long, and it's a bit more over in the literary fiction side, whereas this one is literary fiction, but it's also got a lot of dark academia, it's got a lot of mystery to it, which I really enjoyed. I gave this book 4 stars. I know this is a lot of people's like favourite book. It's definitely up there. Like, I really appreciate it for its literary value. I do think Donna Tartt is a magnificent writer. I don't know, it just didn't give me that 5-star feel, so I gave it 4 stars, but that's fine because 4 stars are very good anyway. This follows a group of prestigious students who are part of a classics class in a prestigious New England college. Yes, New England. It's basically like this elite college that they go to. It's a very small group of students. They're like 6 students in this class. They've got a very interesting and wacky kind of professor who only wants to have a very small amount of students in his class, and he also refuses to be paid for his work, which I thought was a really interesting character, like a very interesting part of his character. And at the beginning of this book we find out that someone has been murdered, and we're just trying to figure out like what happened, how we got to this point, and it's very dark and moody and just all the dark academia vibes. All of the characters are very morally dark and very, like, I want to say two-sided, but like they're more than two-sided. Like, they're so multifaceted. They feel very real. Maybe a slight exaggeration. Like, I don't think everyone is like this, but they do feel like very real people, and I really enjoyed that about this book. The next book that I read in the month of March is another one that I was so excited to pick up. So excited. I've heard so many great things about this book, and the sort of buzzword, I guess, was weird. That it was wacky, that it was odd, that people didn't understand what was going on, and I was really intrigued by that. I honestly, like, weirdness is something that I really gravitate towards in books and in movies, so I was really interested in picking this up, and it's just had a lot of hype, like, in the last couple of years. That is Bunny by Mona Awad. This book was everything and more than what people described it as. It is weird, it's really difficult to understand, but that's absolutely fine. I'm the sort of person where if I don't understand something, unless I absolutely need to, I will be fine with not understanding it, especially if it's in a case like this, where it's sort of like a fairy tale horror, I think it sort of gets described as. Really wacky, a lot of symbolism, I personally think, in this book. And it's just, for me, it's the perfect mixture between being weird but being enjoyable, being a modern book but also having some very good elements to it, some very analytical things, like things that you can definitely get down into and find a deeper meaning about, which I really enjoy. I'm not going to try and explain what Bunny is about. All you need to know is that there's an MFA program that our main character goes to. She is the only student in her class that isn't part of this clique called, I don't know actually, I don't think the clique has a name, but everyone in this clique calls themselves and calls each other Bunny. So like, that's just, you know, weird in itself. I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it to the point where I'm actually thinking that in the next couple of months, maybe I might be picking this up again so that I can analyse it, because I honestly think it's one of those books. I never annotate my books. I haven't done it before and I don't usually feel intrigued to, but recently after reading The Secret History, also reading Bunny, I really do think that this book in particular would be great for annotating, and I will probably do that at some point in the future. The next book that I read in this month is a book that was a very highly anticipated release for me, and that is because it is a book by one of my all-time favourite thriller authors. That is The Minders by John Marrs. This is like a sci-fi thriller book in the same kind of vein as his other sci-fi thriller books that he's written, The Passengers and The One, which I've read both of them and I absolutely loved them, and it's no different for this one. I gave this 5 stars, so I honestly do think that it's probably my favourite of the John Marrs books that I've read so far. I know that a lot of other people didn't receive it in that way, which I think is a shame, but it's just like, this book feels like it carries on from his other books, which I think some people weren't too happy about because it kind of spoils The One and The Passengers in the beginning, but I really like that he's kind of world building in this one, adding to a world that he's already established in his other 2 books, and I really enjoyed it. The Minders is set in our world, not too far into the future. I sort of have guessed that it's around 2030 something, and we've reached a time where people are sort of coming to their last resorts, trying to prohibit cyber terrorism, which obviously is a very real problem like in our world, and is probably going to become an even bigger problem in the future, so it's very relevant in that sense. And they've gotten to their sort of last resorts, and there is a scientist slash doctor that has figured out that you could take all of this information that we don't want people to get their hands on, the bad people to get their hands on, and transform it into a binary code which can then be inserted into DNA, and then the DNA can then be put into a human, and that's how we create the Minders. There's 5 Minders in this book that we follow their different perspectives. There's a lot of different mysteries, like both for each character, because it switches between characters' perspectives, so there's their mysteries, there's also the overarching mystery of like what's going to happen with these Minders, like how's it going to end. We know that because it's a thriller something bad is going to happen, and also because it's like a sci-fi thriller that also there must be something to do with these Minders that's not going to be great. And it was very interesting to me read. I really enjoyed it. Some more books that I read, I'm just going to list them, I'm not going to talk about them. I reread The Hunger Games for a live show that I did with some of my friends. You can go and check that, that's still on my channel. I gave it 5 stars, which is the same as I gave it the first time around I read it. I read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which is the second, chronologically it's the second instalment in the Chronicles of Narnia. I gave that 4 stars. I think they're just really fun, the Narnia books, and I'm looking forward to continuing the series. I read Red at the Bone as part of the Bookhoplathon, and I enjoyed it, but I think I was too tired to really get everything out of it that I should have, so I gave it 3 stars, but it was still very enjoyable. I also read Cheer Up, Love and Pom-Poms, which is a graphic novel which was on NetGalley. I heard Maddie from Book Browsing Blog talk about it during her live stream, so I decided to pick that up. It was very quick and easy to get through. I gave it 3 stars. It was cute. I don't think it's the best graphic novel that I've read so far, but it was cute. Then I read Cress, which is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles, and I gave that 4 stars, the same as I did the first time around I read it. Definitely enjoyed it. Cress is my favourite in the series. Then I read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds as an audiobook. I gave this book 5 stars. It is superb, both as a book, as an audiobook. It was narrated by Jason Reynolds himself. It is kind of like a book written in verse. So I think it gets categorised as poetry, but it does have an overarching narrative. It is a book that is very, very short, but it also only goes over the span of like a very short amount of time. And it feels very relevant. It reminds me a lot of The Hate U Give, in the sense that we are following a character who has lost his brother to gun violence. I can't remember if it's the police or if he was shot by someone else. I think he was shot by someone else that was from like another neighbourhood, but like really relevant in the sense that it talks about gun violence in communities that are do not get the attention and do not get the help that they probably need, are sort of overlooked by the government. Very, very interesting, very moving, and listening to the author narrate it really added to it for me, and I really enjoy it. I urge you guys to go and read it, to listen to it if you want to, because it's so short, it's so quick to get through, but it is so moving and beautiful, and there were some things that were said throughout this book that really resonated with me, even though I couldn't necessarily relate to the situation. The last book that I read for the Bookoplathon was Mortal Engines by Philip Reeve. Gave it 3 stars. Then I read Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. It deserves everything that it has received attention-wise and love-wise. Bernardine Evaristo is once again a genius, a superb author, and I'm so happy that I decided to pick this up. I was slightly daunted because of the love and attention that it has received and the hype. However, this was just amazing. This is a literary fiction book that I think that everyone would be able to read and love and get something out of. It's super important. It's essentially a book that follows 12 different characters. They've all got their own little story, so it feels like short stories, but they are all connected, and they follow girls, they follow women, they follow people who are figuring out their gender identity. There's also a lot of diversity in the sense of race and social class and status and things like that, which was really interesting. It just really is representative of Britain when it comes to the female side of things, or non-binary / trans, that kind of area of things, which was just super interesting to read. I really, really loved it. Once again, this is a book that I think I will at some point reread and annotate, because it is honestly beautiful, but written in a way that's really understandable, so I loved it. Then I read No Escape by Gretchen McNeil. I really enjoyed this. This is part of a series. I will definitely be picking up the next couple of books. It was just so much fun. I don't know how much I've spoken about it. Maybe in the haul where I did haul this book, I spoke about it a little bit. I am obsessed with escape rooms, and the idea of like turning an escape room into the theme for like a horror movie or for a book. I just think it's really cool, the idea of escape rooms where you literally, like, if you don't escape, your life is in danger. It just ups the stakes so much more. I've watched Escape Room, the horror film, which I just really, really loved, and I need to rewatch that at some point, because straight after I finished it, I was like, I want to rewatch it. And I sort of held back on it because otherwise I go down a rabbit hole of just rewatching the same film, which like isn't good. But anything that's escape room themed, there's just something about it. I think that escape rooms really suit the horror genre. So I was super intrigued to read this and to pick this up. And I gave it 4 stars. It was super fun. Like, it wasn't mind-blowing, and while it definitely differed from the film Escape Room, they're not connected, but like it definitely, I was worried that it would sort of have the same, go down the same route, especially when it's an escape room. It's like, how many different types of puzzles can you really do, especially if you're not someone who is like a dedicated escape room creator. Like, I can imagine that as an author that does not necessarily specialise in escape rooms, it would be difficult to come up with ideas. I don't think that the puzzles would particularly like difficult puzzles, or like, they don't remind me of puzzles that you'd find in an actual escape room, but that's fine because it fits the theme. And the one thing I will say is that I was hoping someone would die a lot earlier. Sounds very morbid, but like, let's be real, if you have a book that's called #NoEscape and has got a skull on the front, you do expect someone to die pretty soon. But it took a while. I think I got halfway through before someone actually died, like, which is kind of disappointing, but like, it's fine. I enjoyed it nonetheless. As I said, I gave it 4 stars. I think if you're into escape rooms and you're into horror, then I would definitely pick this up. The next book that I read was a poetry collection by Amanda Lovelace, and that was The Princess Saves Herself in This One. And I didn't give that rating because it was a poetry collection. I don't have much to say on that one. Then I read the second book in the Amulet series, which is a graphic novel series by Kazu Kibuishi. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. I read the first installment in this series last month, as in February, and then I read the second installment, The Stonekeeper's Curse, in March, and I gave that 4 stars, the same as I gave the first installment. I think it's a really fun middle grade series. Then I read What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera, and this was alright. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read a thriller. I read Every Valley Break by Peter Swanson. This is his newest book, and I've only ever read one other book by him, 8 Perfect Murders, I think it's called. And Every Valley Break, I gave 3 stars. It was like a middle of the road thriller. It was alright. I liked the concept. I was definitely intrigued by it, and I do think that Peter Swanson is a good thriller writer. I just think that there wasn't anything mind-blowing, but that's the thing with thrillers, is you just really never know if it's going to be absolutely great or if it's just going to be a bit meh. So once again, it was good, but it wasn't like mind-blowing. And finally, I read a book that I've been wanting to read for ages, that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and I'm definitely going to be picking up the other 2 books in this trilogy. Get a Life, Chloe Brown is written by Talia Hibbert. It is a very big book here on BookTube and on Bookstagram, and it's absolutely loved. And I gave this 4 stars. The reason I gave it 4 stars was not because I did not think it was amazing. I did absolutely think it's amazing. I was bordering on giving it 4.5, but I've decided to go with 4 because I've heard that the next books are so great that I'm thinking they'll probably end up being quite a bit, I'll probably end up rating them quite a bit higher than I did Chloe Brown, so I want to give them room. So it's all relative. Get a Life, Chloe Brown follows Chloe Brown, who is the oldest of the Brown sisters. There's 3 of them, hence why there's 3 books, because they each follow a different Brown sister. And this is just a really fun contemporary. It also gets a little bit serious, and the relationship in it, the main relationship, is very fun, and really, like, there was a lot of chemistry between the 2 characters, basically. I really enjoyed the exploration of chronic illness, because Chloe Brown does suffer from chronic pain and chronic illness that all started, I believe, with an accident of some kind, or like an illness that she had that sort of just like led to chronic illness. Talia Hibbert does mention in the beginning that she herself doesn't I think she wrote that she herself doesn't suffer with chronic pain or chronic illness, but that she just wanted to throw out there that she obviously wanted to have that representation in her book, but she wasn't quite sure how good that representation was. I obviously can't answer for that. I don't have any sort of like chronic ailments, but I thought it was amazing. Such a fun book, but also some serious topics and really interesting. I felt like I could relate to both to Chloe Brown, but also to the love interest Red. I think that there were parts in both of the characters that I really related to, which I think is just a mark of a good, like, of well-written characters, because you should be able to relate to at least some aspects of the majority of characters, because in real life people are just a mixed bag of different things, and you will tend to find that if you learn enough about a person, there's something you can relate to more or less. Obviously not with everyone, but like I think the majority of people have something that they can, even if it's a tiny thing, but just something they can relate to in each other. And that was it. That was it. I'm finished. Yes. I've been filming for ages, and it's the first time I've been filming for a very long time, so it's been a bit weird. I've got a bit of a sore throat. I'm just like, I'm done. All the books that I read in the month of March. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's probably going to end up being quite long just because of how many books I read, and like I read a lot of really good books that I wanted to talk a lot about. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said before, if you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so. It would mean a lot to me. You can also click the like button, that also supports my channel. And go and follow my Instagram, follow my Goodreads if you want to see more in-depth thoughts. I don't post too much like review-wise on Goodreads, but I do sometimes post little reviews. So if you want to see that, definitely make sure to follow my Goodreads. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching this video, and I hopefully will see you in my next one.